a fantastic talk up from next, someone we've come to refer to as the policy whisperer. New digital policies, of course, when you implement them, face a tremendous amount of resistance. Partly that's because digital is new, so everyone suspects it at first. People often resent these policies because change is hard and we don't want to do things we don't know. Louis Eisen argues that you need to tie your policies back to your organization's core values, and he's here to show you how. Louis has worked as a lawyer, a tech consultant, and a policy writer, and his unique approach to drafting effective policies has been adopted across multiple national governments. So please join me in giving a very warm Forward 50 welcome to Louis Eisen. Hi, Louis. How are you?
I'm great, Alistair. What a wonderful introduction. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. So we're going to try something a little tricky with your slides and an interactive poll and you, and hopefully this will go smoothly. You've got Alex and I behind the scenes to help out. Why don't you take it away and everybody follow along, and we'll be showing you lots of different screens as we go.
You got it. Thanks, everyone, for coming. I really appreciate that you've given me your time. I actually want to pick up where I left off from last year. Now, I know a number of you weren't at the talk last year, and some of you, even if you were at Forward 50 last year, you weren't in the executive track. So I'm going to take a page out of the book of Netflix, because I do a lot of Netflix watching, and when you don't see all the previous episodes, you need to catch up with a recap. So I've got a recap of what happened last year. Can we run that?
Previously at Forward 50.
Tone of voice is not on people's radar. We heard before, give people a job and trust them to do what they need to do. What we learned growing up was that rules should sound bossy. It's very easy to get the people up front to buy in if you can word your policy properly. The strictest laws in any country are the criminal laws. That's the law against murder. So we have a very absurd situation now. Criminal laws are worded across the country more respectfully than the policies that come out of many organizations. We have policies that aren't reader-centric.
It often occurs to me that the books of policies come about because of the cacophony of special interests.
How do you couch policies in a way that engages people? And now the conclusion. And I'm going to pick up where I left off. I want to talk more about the relationship between values and policy, and I'm going to start you off with a poll. So again, just like you did with Menti, if you just take your phone and take a camera shot, it will take you to the right page. And if you don't want to use your phone, you can use a browser. Just type in Slido in the URL, and we'll ask you what code the code is Forward 50. And my question for you is, would you describe your policy approach at your organization to be a command and control approach or a trust and empowerment approach? So command and control policies say, we're going to tell you what to do, how to do it, and the consequences of not doing it. A trust and empowerment approach says, we're going to give you our objective, train you, give you the tools, and trust that you're going to do it properly. So number one, it's at that end is the command and control. Number 5 is a trust and empowerment approach. If you choose the wrong answer, just change your answer. Very easy. Okay, we can see a number of polls coming in. We have the early polls returning on the writing from this election. So you've got a lot of new technologies, new approaches, new systems. And so far, all the talks that we've been hearing have given us all kinds of good ideas about what factors to look at when considering what decision you want to make. What I do is show people how to convey those decisions once you've decided what you've wanted to choose, and that's a little bit of an overlooked skill. Now, I don't know, maybe people at your organization love change. They love rules, and they love when you change the rules, and so you don't have a problem. But most of us, we face resistance, passive, active, sometimes complete non-compliance. The command and control approach to resistance is, well, we'll just tell them and they'll have to do it. So I can see that on the results is sort of approximate 2.5 average just a little below where people place themselves on the scale. So I'm going to ask you now, what would you like your organization to be? You can just change your answer if it's not what it was. Tell me what it is that, if you could pin your organization along this perspective, where would it be? So we don't just want to know how to make policies. We want to know how to make policies that people will rally behind. We want people to say, we have great policies that those are going to, I love the policies here. Everybody should be following them. What most of us want in our organization is cooperation with our policies. Unfortunately, what most of the policies look like they're asking for is obedience. So the polls have come in and there's quite a shift from what was clearly on the lower side to what's clearly on the higher side. There's an average score there of 3.4. Well, let me show you what a typical policy might look like in a that I would take from an organization. Now, I found this one on the web. This came from a province. I've hidden the name of the province and the organization, so I don't want to embarrass them. But this is very typical of a policy that comes down, a rule that they want to have. And nobody's going to look at this and say, wow, what a great policy. I love that. Well, I guess the people who wrote it would say that. I showed you last year a policy comparison that looked at roughly worded and gently worded. That is your policy an outstretched hand trying to help people, or is your policy a hand blocking them? Is your policy telling people you'd like their cooperation, or is it telling people you want their obedience? The way I generally recommend that people write policy is as a simple affirmative statement. There you go. That's our policy. Office hours are from 9 to 5. It's in the present tense. A policy is a statement of the way you do things. It's a statement of your corporate culture. And it can sit very easily in the present tense. So last year I showed you how the Canadian Criminal Code managed to prohibit all kinds of nasty stuff just by using the present tense. I've done a little more research since then. So in the last few weeks, I've surveyed every single penal code of the 50 United States, and I've looked for how they prohibit arson. And 80% of them use this present tense format to prohibit arson. Doesn't say you must not, you will not, you shall not. There's no parent-child dynamic here. It manages to prohibit what most of us think is a pretty serious crime without ever going into this finger-wagging mode. Now, 20% of the codes still do use the old term. So they still say things like, no one shall start a fire. I mean, really, nothing says contemporary like shall, right? But 80% of them stick with this present tense format. Now, when I teach people about how to change word here, re-rule them in a nicer way, I get a lot of pushback from old style policy writers who say, we have to use must. How are people going to know whether the requirement is mandatory or optional if we don't use the word must? Absolutely. We need to distinguish mandatory from optional requirements. There's no question about it. How could we mark things that are mandatory? Let's see. We could put them in boldface. We could put an asterisk beside them. We could put them in a different color. We could put them in a different section of the page. Maybe the mandatory ones on top and the optional ones on the bottom, or in different columns side by side. Or we could have a provision at the top saying all the rules are mandatory except those we've marked optional. It's very easy to get rid of the musts and the shoulds and reword the rules in a way that sounds helpful. The hard question is, are you willing to give up the I'm in charge here tone of voice? Do you really want to move from a command and control organization to one that fosters trust and empowerment? Carol Ring is a corporate culture expert based in Ottawa, and she says if you've hired qualified people with a genuine desire to succeed, you can't leverage that with command and control. You can't approach your rulemaking like we're writing these rules to keep people in line. Too many organizations still do that. I see policies being written with employees shall and standards being proposed that say The organization shall maintain a system of record, and the organization shall select an assessment team. Yes, I know that ISO, the International Standards Association, still uses this approach, but it's so antiquated. It dates from the days when command and control structure was the ultimate in people management. And it's so unnecessary. Look at this comparison. I mean, really, is there some doubt on the right-hand side that some doubt about the fact that we're strict about these dimensions? I don't think so. There's no reason why our policies have to be written in an ancient tone of voice. You know what I think of when I see the one on the left? Honest to God, I look at that and all I can think of is Yul Brynner playing Pharaoh in the Ten Commandments. So shall it be written, so shall it be done. In fact, there's one thing you need on that standard on the left to make it official, and that's a seal. Okay, now there's a standard that an emperor can be proud of. Do you want to dictate a standard? That's the way you dictate things. Your policies are a reflection of your organization's values, both what you say and how you say it. And your organization does not demonstrate that it values cooperation, teamwork, inclusiveness, and respect if the wording of its policies conveys that the objective is obedience. So when you comment on policies and standards that people are circulating, I would not just comment on the content, I would also comment on the tone. There's no reason why our standards have to sound fiercer than the rules against arson. And if you adopt outside standards, I would adjust the language. Same way you would adjust it for GBA and all the other gender neutrality, all the other things you would do to modernize the language. I would modernize it and get rid of the musts and the woulds and the shalls. I'd like to talk for a moment about tying your values to your policy. And in order to do that, I need to talk about what actually is a policy. And I'm going to be very strict on this. When I use these terms, policy, standard, and procedure, they mean something very specific. So I know a lot of organizations, they have documents they call policy, and it includes everything in the kitchen sink. It includes the rules and the background and the context and the roles and responsibilities and the punishment and all kinds of stuff get in there. But policy, standard, and procedure actually means something very specific. And I'll be showing you at the end of this talk why it's so important to make that distinction. A policy is a statement of the way you do things. It's a decision that you make about how your organization works. I particularly like the we format for a policy. This is what we do. A standard is a set of technical specifications. Technical doesn't mean technological. I mean, I know people think technical means technology, but no, it's technical in the old sense of the word technique. So here's a standard around letter size paper. There are no musts in a standard. There's no shoulds, there's no shalls. It's just specs. It's just a set of technical specs. A procedure is a set of steps. It has a beginning, you do it in sequence, it has an end. That's what a procedure is. So when I talk about making something a policy or a standard procedure, I'm going to be using those terms very strictly. Let me show you a policy done well. When I had to convert my book from from printed format to Kindle format, I had to make some adjustments. So you may know that Kindle has a number of devices that are still monochrome. So you can't display all the colors properly. In the hard copy edition of the book, there's black text with burgundy highlights around the policy. So I couldn't use that burgundy in the Kindle edition. So Kindle had to tell me what I could use, and they could have done it wrong. They didn't do it. They did it great. Let me show you if I can flip back to the slide here. This is what wrong would have looked like. Wrong would have said, you must use one of these colors, and given me colors. And if they had done that, I'm sure my reaction would be probably the same as yours. You look at it and you go, really? I mean, those are the 5 ugliest colors you could find to offer me. And then I would say, well, why are you fettering my discretion anyways? I'm the author. I'm creating an experience. Why are you fettering this? I look at this statement and this says to me, here are the crayons Mummy says you can use. But they didn't do it. They did it really well. They said, when choosing colors for ebooks, we conform to W3C recommendations. Okay, I get that. What a great idea. I can see what value underlies that. Can you? Can I ask you to go back to Slido and just enter one word or two, what corporate value you think underlies this particular policy? Once, I need my slides for a moment, if I could, Alex, thanks. Once they showed me this policy, they followed it up with, because I looked at it and I think this is great, I'd like to know how to do that. And now they give me the standard, and the standard is a set of technical specs. Here's the formula you need to use. And it was very technical, and I had to worry about, getting it right. And after a few minutes, I sort of said, could you show me some examples of things that would work? And then I see this. But this is great. I don't object to this because I understand what this is about. Now we can map this to a chart. Here is a framework of values, policies, and guidance. Now I know a lot of people write policy frameworks, and at the very top, they put policy. And sometimes they put legislation at the very top, but there's a huge area that's missing. Your policies, standards, and procedures need to come from your corporate mandate, mission, values, strategies, principles. All those things also feed into your policies. So I can see here that what we have is a policy. We adopt W3C standards, and they've given me a technical standard for it, and they've given me some examples. And what's the value? So a number of you have actually hit it correctly. It's accessibility. This is about customer focused, makes it easier for reading. That's right. This is about accessibility or inclusiveness or usability. That's the corporate value that underlies this. I can see that. There's also a principle at work, and the principle weighs two values. So in principle would say, yes, I know we have several values. One value is more important than the other. And if the two come to clash, we're going to go against, so one will trump the other. And the one that you're worried about in the principle are what will people object to? So when I objected earlier, I said that color is ugly. And why are you even fettering what I want to do, my preference? So I'm talking about, I think there's a value about aesthetics and there's a value to personal preference. But in fact, we need a corporate principle that says usability trumps aesthetics. Usability trumps preference. So now I can trace this policy right up through the organization's values, and it's very clear, and I have no problem saying, great policy, everybody should be following it. Now I'm going to give you a couple hard examples. Here's a policy I see a lot in organizations. They have PIAs and they want people to follow it. What is the value that this is protecting? And it's not privacy. So I'd like you to enter again in the chat. I mean, obviously privacy is related here, but why? Why are we spending so much time on privacy? It's not like we're a society where everybody walks around so secretive. We're spending time on privacy for a reason. What's the corporate value behind it? I'd like you, if you could, to enter that in the chat. Tell you, when I look at this, here's what I see in this policy. I see a procedure called a privacy impact assessment, and I see that it's mandatory. So all we have here is a statement that says we have a mandatory procedure. It's very hard for anybody to say, oh, I love that. What a great idea. This is not easy figuring out what the value is underneath it. I'm going to pull up some of the answers that we get. I'm getting trust, accessibility, need some more here. Answers on, I'm not quite hitting it. Why is it we're so intent on getting privacy protected here? So I map this way. We have a procedure called a privacy impact assessment. And you've got all other kinds of guidance. It happens that this procedure is mandatory, but I don't see the policy here. So I'm going to extrapolate. I can tell you from my experience working with the government when I was there for several years, the thinking is this: people will not trust us with their private information if we can't treat it well. And we need their trust. We can't run government properly unless we have the trust of the people. So this is about trustworthiness. This is about earning people's trust. Now, not every organization is the same. So in fact, there may be a reason why you use privacy, which is not about getting people's trust. But for most of the groups that I was there, so we cannot have trust of the public without that. And in fact, we have a strategy that says we will take special care of private information. Because we want the trust of the public, we have strategies. We're going to do a whole bunch of things to take care of private information. And I think the policy is this: we take steps proactively to prevent privacy breaches. That's what we do. And that's what you want people rallying behind. That's the one that you want people to say, yes, what a great idea. Absolutely, I agree with that. Let me show you what JP Morgan's privacy policy looks like. JP Morgan has taken a lot of pain to get the shoulds and the woulds and the musts out of its policies, to try to get rid of the command and control approach to policy design and move with the trust and empowerment. And this is on their website. This particular thing is about data accuracy. You'll notice it's done in the present tense. And it uses the we format, which I really like, but it says this is how we do things. This is the way we handle it. And absolutely, people will look at that and say, yeah, that's a really good policy. How? And that's what you want. You want people to say, taking steps to proactively prevent breaches, great policy. How? And then you pull your procedure out of your pocket. Aren't you lucky? I have a privacy impact assessment ready to go. That's my procedure, and it's ready for you to use it. JP Morgan traces this particular policy up to its value of acting with integrity and responsibility, specifically acting with responsibility. It's one of its 3 core values: delivering exceptional client service, supporting the growth of their employees, and acting with integrity and responsibility. And it's very easy to trace it up. Gets harder as we look at policies that, again, we see on people's websites. There's a policy that I saw constantly. What's the value underlying that policy? I loved it when Joy at this meeting told us yesterday, she was at a meeting where they're talking about wet signatures, and she says, whoa, why? What's the value that we think wet signatures preserve for our corporation? Because I'll tell you what I see when I look at this. I see a technical standard, YYY, MMDD. I see a place where the standard applies, and I see that it's mandatory. So I would map that like this. There's a standard. We have a procedure that says, put the date here with that standard, and we have examples. It doesn't tell me the policy. Why is it we're doing this? So see, what are people thinking is the I can look, what have people thought here is the underlying value of this policy? And this is a hard one, I have to tell you. I haven't seen any results yet, either that or people aren't sure. Oh, we've got some there. Thank you. Those aren't showing up on my screen, so thank you. Consistency, compliance, risk aversion, comfort, adherence. Guess what? Those are interesting and useful, but they are not values. They are strategies. They are methodologies. The notion that you want to be consistent, that you want to standardize. Why do you want to be consistent? Why do we want to be standardized? What do you think consistency will get you? I got to compare this to when is something a standard and when is it a value? Sorry, when is it a value? When is it a strategy? You know, there's a TV detective named Monk who's OCD, and he solves all these crimes because he's OCD. And It's very clever, but he sees all these things. For Monk, if there are 8 glasses of water in the room, they all have to be at the same level. It doesn't matter if the level is good or the level is bad. They need to be at the same level. Standardization is a value for Monk. In a communist society, everybody has to have the same house. Doesn't matter if it's good or bad, as long as it's standard. That's when standardization is a value. For most of us, it's not a value. It's a way to get somewhere. Same with consistency. We're not about consistency. We don't walk around saying this world needs more consistency. Everything needs. It's going to lead us somewhere. Where is it going to lead us? That's the hard part. Some of you have mentioned it in here in your comments there. Standardization leads us to accuracy or clarity. That is, you're hoping that the consistency will bring you accuracy. Now, how do you tell the difference between a standard, between something that's just a value and a strategy? I mean, standardization and consistency is really easy, I can tell you, because you want standardization and consistency in your hardware, probably for reasons of economy of scale and maybe prudent use of the taxpayers' money. You want consistency and standards in your procurement processes, but that has more to do with fairness. I don't think this date standard has anything to do with fairness or use of the taxpayers' money or economy of scale. People will stand up for their values. The way you can test it is by saying, will you add it to the end of the sentence, we do not compromise on. We do not compromise on accuracy. Are we going to compromise on standardization? Absolutely. I hope there's lots of times we don't standardize. We don't do it when it doesn't apply, but we don't compromise on accuracy. We don't compromise on safety. We don't compromise on integrity. Those are values. You do not compromise on them. People will stand up for their values. People hold their values close. People will not stand up and lose sleep over standardization, but they will stand up for accuracy. Compliance is not a corporate value. Compliance is a strategy again. And those of you that have been going around trying to hit people over the head with compliance will know that it doesn't actually get you a lot of traction. What's the value behind compliance? Now, it's taken a lot of brainstorming with a number of very sort of high-up people for me to come up with this, but I think in most organizations, the value is integrity. Integrity says, I did a good job and I did it by the book. I didn't break rules. I was honest and transparent. I have integrity as a person, as an organization, and that's why I want compliance. Compliance is a strategy to preserve your integrity. Nobody takes a rallying cry off compliance, but they will off integrity. One of the people in my workshop came to me after and she said, thank you for this. This is just so important. I've been kicking myself because I didn't go into this field to play cop. I didn't go into this field to have a bunch of rules and walk around and getting people just to comply. And that's what I felt that I was deteriorating in. But now I see that, in fact, my job is about preserving integrity. And I'm happy to go around and teach people how they can keep their integrity and show them how compliance can help them do that. What a load off my shoulders, she said. I'm not walking around playing cop now. I'm preserving a value that's important to me. The open government people have learned this. So my good colleague, Jeff Ball, used to be open government director at Treasury Board, and he's now open government director at the RCMP. And when they started a while back trying to sell transparency to everybody, you need to publish your documents because the policy is clear. We proactively publish our documents. And they sold it on this value of transparency, but transparency, again, is just a strategy. So when he used to try and sell it on transparency, people would say, yeah, okay, but they would brush him off. In fact, for the RCMP, for many police organizations, for many government organizations, the issue is not about transparency. The issue is about earning the trust of the public. In order to earn the trust of the public, we need to be as transparent as possible. So again, it's not that we don't compromise on transparency. What we don't want to compromise on is having the public trust us, our trustworthiness. So we have a strategy to be as transparent as possible. And now that he's selling that in that light, now that we're spotlighting the right value, people are thinking about it. Because it's very difficult to argue, oh, I don't want trust. I don't want people's trust. So if you can trace your way to the value, you can then come and formulate the actual policy. Let me come back to this one. What's the policy here for our date? I think the policy is based on a principle of accuracy is more important than your preference. Our policy is that we use a single date format across all systems. That's our policy. That's what you want people to rally behind. That's what you want people to say, yes, great policy. How? How do I do that? And then you pull out your standard. Then you pull out your procedures. You want people to be able to look at it and say, absolutely, that policy resonates with me. It looks good. It feels good. If someone says to you, I don't believe in accuracy, you answer like, maybe you're not really well suited to work in this organization. If they came to you and said, well, I believe in accuracy and I believe in standardization, but I don't believe that having a single date format across all systems is the way to go, now we can at least have an adult discussion about it. It's not a question about we're telling you to do it and you're obeying or not obeying. We can now have an adult discussion about the right policy to have under a strategy of standardization to achieve accuracy. Let me go back then to this social media policy, because whenever I present this at a talk, people come up to me after always and say, well, how would you adjust this? How are you going to fix that? So in fact, we can use it because we want that. Well, absolutely. There's nothing wrong with having the associate deputy minister approve those social media accounts if that's what you want. The problem is I have to try and figure out, well, I can't rescue it until I know why. What's the policy behind this? What's the value? What are we preserving? So the way that came down on the website, I look at it and I go, I have to try and extrapolate, reverse engineer it. So I sat and I thought, what could the possible scenarios be where this would be a policy? Where this rule would come out. And I've come up with 3 separate scenarios. The first one is maybe we have an organization where we've got a lot of people using social media accounts, but they're not very professional and they're making us look bad. So in fact, our problem is that we have some reputation management to do. We want people to trust us. People won't trust us if we look like clowns. We need to manage our reputation. So we're going to put in some policies about it. And the policy we're going to put in is that we train people to handle our social media accounts. And I think most people will look at that and say, yes, what a great policy. Absolutely. Let's do that. From that policy, you will have a number of standards, a whole bunch of guidance. We've got all kinds of guidance that people put together. As well as that standard, you will have a procedure on how to apply for an account and training. And in that procedure, there is a step that says, submit the application to the ADM for approval, and that's a mandatory step. So I could see how that rule could be a mandatory step if I trace it all this way down. Maybe, though, it's not about reputation management. Maybe, in fact, the problem is that people are behaving professionally, but everybody's getting a different experience. So the problem is that people are not getting a uniform. We want to maintain consistency of experience. So our policy is we standardize the experience we offer to the public. In that case, we produce a whole bunch of standards, whole list of specifications on what has to happen. And then there's a procedure where you can apply to be a point of service. And in that procedure, there is a step to submit the application to the ADM for approval. Maybe it's not about trustworthiness at all. Maybe, in fact, it's about that the information on the social media accounts is getting lost because we aren't treating it seriously in record keeping. We want to be accountable. We want to make sure that what we say is treated as well as it is in our general communications. So we have a strategy to officialize all social media accounts and make that real communication. So we create a policy that says we are going to store and record our social media. And isn't that wonderful happenstance? We have a standard already in place. We have a record-keeping life cycle we can apply. We've got all kinds of rules, and we're going to need a procedure, an account creation registration procedure, so that we can make sure you get registered and we can capture this stuff. And in there is a step which says you submit this. At best, having to submit an application to an ADM for approval is a step in a procedure. The reason it's so important to distinguish policy from standard from procedure is because when you raise a step in a procedure up to the level of policy, you're saying this is one of our values. And when I read that policy, it is prohibited for any employee to use or manage a social account. I can tell you what value that is. That's command and control. That value doesn't show trust or empowerment. That value says we don't trust any of you to do it, so you better run it by us first. That's what the value says. Now, the people who wrote this, they're going to say to me, people are ignoring it. Like, a lot of people who aren't doing the step or skipping it or following it. You know what? Absolutely, we need people to follow it. So you may need to put in safeguards. You may need to step up enforcement. You may need to change your process. There may be a bunch of things you need to do to make sure the step doesn't get skipped. But raising a procedural step up to the level of policy is not a safeguard. Incidentally, this applies just as much to the instructions you give to the public. I can't tell you the number of times I see things like this on websites. You know, you must be 65 and you must provide your full name and you must give us this and you must do that because it's mandatory. Bridget Antwi of the Ontario Digital Service spoke earlier. She's in her content management, she's done an incredible job trying to get rid of all the musts and the shoulds. Not only is it sending a better message, they're finding people are obliging better. They're getting much better response when they're using good wording to invite people. That second one, I mean, that looks like it's being helpful. And yet we have the same strict rule without using must or should. Your organization does not demonstrate that it values cooperation, teamwork, and inclusiveness if the wording of its policies conveys that your object is obedience. I'm sure you have good reasons for your policies. I'm sure you even have good values. The challenge is to articulate them and to make sure your rules reflect them. I know there are people who are going to say, if it was good enough for Pharaoh, it's good enough for us. But in fact, we really need some leadership here. We need people to sit like Joy and say, that's nice that we have this requirement. Why? What's the underlying value? Now, listen, I've been able to put together a list of values. If you're struggling with it, I have a list of 200 possible values. Just hit me up afterwards on LinkedIn, ask for it. I'm happy to send it out because I'll tell you what I see out there. I see a lot of good people working very hard, doing their best to make well-intentioned, meaningful change, but whose efforts are being undermined by policies and rules that reflect a different set of values. Thank you so much for participating and answering those the things that really helps to make this more interactive. Alistair, we good?
We are great, Lewis. That was fantastic. I loved your previously thing. When you were sitting here telling the story, I was literally like, previously, and I love the fact that you had the, you know, I said that out loud and then I had that word and I was thinking of the, you know, and now the conclusion of fantastic. And honestly, the stuff you say seems so obvious. Like I look at it, I'm like, of course, that's the way you should do it. You start with these values and things trickle down from that. So easy, I think, in the heat of the moment to forget to take that step back. And yet if you do, a lot of these complex, annoying, debating topics can sort of just resolve themselves, and it's almost tragic to me that people don't take that step back. So, folks at home, Lewis, you're going to head over to Q&A, and anybody who wants to grab a conversation with you over there, please head on over. Go ahead and click that button. If you want to join Lewis and you have questions for him, head over to Q&A to chat with him one-on-one. Lewis, thank you so much for being a part of this conference.
You're welcome. Alistair, we should say that last year's talk is available, though, right, on your site?
If you go on access.forward50.com and you look under 2020, your talk is in there, so people can see the first part of this. And we'll definitely find a way to maybe put a post together that has the 2 links so people can watch the whole of the Lewis cinematic universe.
Okay, to be continued next year.
Great. Thank you so much, Lewis.
Okay.